He divorced his wife and abandoned their sick daughter to marry his mistress, unaware his wife just won a $30 billion contract. Listen to me very carefully. I need you to imagine something. Imagine standing in front of 500 people in designer suits and diamond jewelry. Crystal chandeliers above you. A wedding that cost more than most people's houses. And the groom, your ex-husband, is at the altar with his new bride. A woman dripping in wealth and privilege. Now imagine the bride's father taking the microphone, and instead of a toast, you hear this. Before we continue this celebration, I need to address something important. Garrett Carter presented himself to my family as an ambitious, single professional. But he failed to mention that he was married for 9 years to Dr. Josephine Hartwell, the brilliant pharmaceutical researcher who recently won a $30 billion federal contract, the largest biotech deal in United States history. The room goes silent. Every head turns, and they are all looking at you. He failed to mention that he has a 6-year-old daughter named Rosalie, who suffers from cystic fibrosis. A daughter he divorced his wife to abandon, signing away his parental rights just 2 months ago because her medical needs were, in his words, a financial and emotional liability. The bride starts crying. The groom's face drains of all color. 500 phones come out simultaneously. And you, standing in the back in an emerald dress, holding your head high, finally get to watch the man who called you worthless realize he just threw away everything for nothing. That actually happened, and I'm going to tell you exactly how we got there. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who was supposed to love you? Have you ever watched someone choose money over family, status over integrity, convenience over commitment? Have you ever wanted to see karma work in real time, not in some vague future, but right now, publicly, devastatingly? This is that story. This is about Josephine Hartwell, a brilliant biotech researcher and mother who was abandoned by her husband on the same morning she became a billionaire. And he had no idea. This is about a 6-year-old girl fighting for every breath while her father signed papers calling her a liability. This is about a wedding that became a reckoning. And this is about the kind of justice that restores your faith that the universe is paying attention. My name is Dr. Phillips, and I need you to stay with me on this one, because what you're about to hear is going to make your blood boil, break your heart, and then put it back together in the most satisfying way possible. If you're ready for a story about betrayal, resilience, and the ultimate comeback, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from, or just say I'm with you, Dr. Phillips, because we're about to dive into something incredible. Let's go back to where it started, the morning that changed everything. The morning Garrett Brennan packed his final suitcase, Josephine Hartwell was staring at an email she had read 17 times. Her hands were trembling so violently she could barely hold her phone. The subject line was simple, clinical even. FDA approval, priority review granted. Below it, buried in governmental language and bureaucratic formatting, was the culmination of 12 years of her life. Her biotech company, Hartwell Therapeutics, had just been awarded a $30 billion federal contract for pandemic preparedness and next-generation antimicrobial development, the largest pharmaceutical research deal in United States history. She had received the notification at 5:23 in the morning, 18 minutes before Garrett came downstairs with designer luggage she had helped him purchase during Better. Times his jaw set with the particular determination of a man who had rehearsed this moment in mirrors. But Josie's mind was not on Garrett. It was on the tiny bedroom upstairs where their 6-year-old daughter, Rosalie, slept fitfully, her small chest rising and falling with the labored breathing that came with cystic fibrosis. The nebulizer hummed its familiar song, a soundtrack that had become the rhythm of their lives ever since the diagnosis 3 years ago. Rosie's medication schedule was taped to the refrigerator, a complicated choreography of enzymes, antibiotics, chest physiotherapy, and the experimental compound Josie had been developing in secret, the one that might actually save her daughter's life, the one Garrett knew nothing about because he had stopped asking about her work 2 years ago. Josie heard his footsteps on the stairs, each step deliberate, measured, final. She looked up from her phone, the email still glowing on the screen, and watched her husband of 9 years set 2 expensive bags by the door. "I'm leaving today." Garrett's voice carried the flat affect of someone who had already left, emotionally, and was simply completing the paperwork of departure. He did not look at her as he spoke. "My attorney will contact yours. I've already drafted everything. It'll be quick, no contest, clean break. Josie's fingers tightened around her phone, the screen with the $30 billion contract notification pressed against her palm. Today, her voice came out smaller than she intended. Rosie has her pulmonology appointment this afternoon. Dr. Chen said it was important that we both be there. Don't, he interrupted, finally meeting her eyes. And what she saw there was worse than anger. It was indifference. Don't make this about Rosie. This is about us, about how we've been drowning for years. I can't be the person you need me to be. I can't watch our daughter suffer anymore. I can't live in this. He gestured at their modest apartment, at the medical equipment that turned their living room into a makeshift clinic, at the stack of research journals on the coffee table, at her laptop perpetually open to compound formulas and grant applications. This hospital existence, this poverty, this endless, hopeless struggle, the cruelty of calling their life hopeless while their daughter slept one floor above them, struck Josie like a physical blow. But before she could respond, Garrett's phone buzzed. His expression softened instantly, a transformation she recognized with sick clarity. He typed quickly, and she caught the name at the top of the screen. Kathleen, with a heart emoji. Kathleen Prescott, daughter of Theodore Prescott, the real estate magnate whose luxury developments dominated the city skyline. Josie had met her once at a charity gala she had been reluctant to attend, had watched Garrett's eyes follow Kathleen's diamond-draped figure with an intensity that made Josie's stomach turn. She had dismissed her anxiety then, too exhausted from Rosie's latest hospitalization to trust her instincts, too buried in research and medical bills and the constant fear of losing her daughter to pay attention to the warning signs. "You're leaving me for her," Josie said it quietly. Not a question. Garrett had the decency to look uncomfortable for exactly 3 seconds. Kathleen understands ambition. She values success. Her father is offering me a partnership. Real equity in Prescott development, not just a salary. He sees my potential. The unspoken accusation hung between them. Unlike you. What Garrett did not know, could not know because he had stopped listening years ago, was that Josie had used every connection she had built in pharmaceutical research to get him his current position at Morrison Medical Devices. She had called in favors, written recommendations, coached him through interviews, all while conducting her own research in a cramped laboratory, all while managing Rosie's deteriorating health, all while building Hartwell Therapeutics from their garage into something that might actually matter. What about Rosie? The question tasted like ash in her mouth. Garrett's jaw tightened. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, smiled slightly, then looked back at Josie with an expression that would haunt her for months. The paperwork includes termination of parental rights. I can't be her father anymore, Josie. I can't afford it, emotionally or financially. The medical bills are endless. She's not getting better. The Prescotts, they expect someone unencumbered, someone who can focus on building a future instead of clinging to a past that's killing us both. He was surrendering their daughter, signing her away like a bad investment. The words Josie wanted to scream stayed locked in her throat. That Rosie was getting better. That the experimental treatment Josie had been developing was showing unprecedented results in early trials. That the $30 billion contract meant not just validation of her work, but resources to fund clinical trials that could save thousands of children like Rosie. That everything he claimed to want, security, success, recognition, was literally sitting in her inbox while he texted his mistress. But she said nothing, because a man who could abandon his sick daughter for a real estate partnership did not deserve to know what he was walking away from. The attorney will send papers. Please don't contest this. Let me go, Josie. Let us both move on. Garrett picked up his bags, the designer luggage she had helped him choose when they had celebrated his promotion 3 years ago, when they had still believed they were building something together. She watched from the window as he loaded everything into a black Mercedes she did not recognize. Undoubtedly Kathleen's. He did not look back at the apartment, did not glance up at Rosie's window where their daughter's nightlight still glowed in the early morning dimness. He simply drove away, and Josie stood in the silence that followed, the email about $30 billion burning in her hand while her marriage dissolved in carbon monoxide and expensive leather seats. The apartment felt impossibly quiet. Josie made herself move through familiar routines, brewing coffee in the second-hand French press, checking Rosie's oxygen saturation monitor, reviewing the medication schedule taped to the refrigerator. But her hands shook. Her vision kept blurring. and the email notification kept glowing like a beacon in a storm she could not yet navigate. Upstairs, she heard Rosie begin to cough. That distinctive, wet sound that sent ice through Josie's veins every single time. She abandoned her coffee and ran up the stairs, her training overriding her panic. Rosie was sitting up in bed, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in small hands. Her eyes were wide and frightened. "Mama, can't breathe good." Rosie's voice came out in a whisper, each word an effort. "It's okay, baby. We're going to do a treatment, and you'll feel better. Remember, breathe with me. Slow, like we practiced." Josie was already reaching for the nebulizer, for the emergency inhaler. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, administering medication, adjusting oxygen flow, holding Rosie against her chest. She felt her daughter's breathing gradually ease, the small body in her arms relaxing as the medicine took effect. This was her reality, not board meetings or federal contracts, but 3 a.m., breathing crises and medications that cost more than rent. This was what Garrett called hopeless. This fierce, desperate love for a child who fought every day just to breathe. "Where is Daddy?" Rosie asked when she could speak again, her voice small and raspy. Josie's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces she would have to pick up later. "Daddy had to go away for work, sweetheart. But I'm here. I'm always here. He didn't say goodbye. I know. I'm sorry." Rosie was quiet for a long moment. Her small fingers played with the rabbit's ears, twisting the soft fabric the way she did when she was processing something difficult. "Is it because I'm sick? Does he not want me anymore because I'm broken?" "No." Josie said it fiercely, pulling her daughter closer, careful of the oxygen tubing. "You are not broken. You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful person I know. Daddy is. He's going through something difficult. But it has nothing to do with you. You are perfect, and you are so, so loved. You won't leave. Never. I promise you, Rosie, I will never leave you." She held her daughter until she fell back asleep, then sat in the rocking chair by the window, watching dawn break over the city. The sky turned from black to deep blue to pale gold. Morning sounds began to filter through the window. Traffic, birds, the world continuing as if hers had not just ended. Her phone buzzed with notifications. News outlets had already picked up the story of the federal contract. Her email inbox was exploding with interview requests. Her small team at Hartwell Therapeutics was frantically trying to reach her. But there was one notification that stopped her cold. An email from Garrett's attorney, time-stamped 6:47 a.m. with divorce papers attached, and a custody termination agreement that described Rosalie as a financial and emotional liability the father could no longer support. He had filed everything before she had even woken up, before he had left. He had planned this with the cold precision of a business transaction, and now he expected her to sign away his parental rights so he could marry into the Prescott fortune unencumbered by inconvenient family obligations. Josie opened her contacts and called Delilah. Her best friend answered on the first ring, her voice bright with excitement. "I just saw the news about the contract. Josie, oh my God, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell me it was this close? This is everything you've been working for. We need to celebrate. I'm coming over right now with champagne and—" "Garrett left this morning," Josie interrupted, her voice carefully controlled. Silence on the other end. Then, a string of profanity so creative Josie would have laughed under different circumstances. "He's filing for divorce. He's terminating his rights to Rosie. He's marrying Kathleen Prescott." "What?" Delilah's voice went from shocked to furious in a single syllable. "Does he know about the contract?" "No. He was too busy texting his mistress to notice the email. Too busy packing to ask about my work. Too busy planning his exit to realize what he's walking away from. Are you going to tell him?" Josie looked at Rosie, sleeping peacefully now, her small chest rising and falling with slightly easier breaths than yesterday. "No. A man who abandons his sick daughter doesn't deserve to benefit from the work he called a failure. Let him marry his heiress. Let him think he won. I have more important things to focus on, like saving our daughter's life and building an empire that actually means something. That's my girl." Delilah said it fiercely, with the loyalty of someone who had been there, through every crisis, every hospital stay, every grant rejection. "Now, what do you need from me?" "Everything," Josie admitted. "I need an attorney who can handle both the divorce and the corporate contracts. I need someone to manage media requests. I need to figure out how to expand the company while taking Rosie to pulmonology appointments. Say less. I'm calling my cousin who does corporate law. I'm reaching out to my contact at Fletcher PR, and I'm coming over right now with breakfast and a plan. You're not doing this alone." After they hung up, Josie allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Harsh, silent sobs that shook her shoulders but made no sound because Rosie was sleeping, and she had learned long ago how to grieve quietly. Then she washed her face, made more coffee, and opened her laptop. If Garrett wanted a divorce, she would give him one. If he wanted to erase himself from their daughter's life, she would not stop him. But she would protect Rosie. From financial insecurity, from the father who had abandoned her, from ever feeling broken again. And she would build something so magnificent, so undeniably successful that Garrett's betrayal would become nothing more than a footnote in her story. She pulled up the document she had been working on for 3 years. Heartwell Therapeutics, CF Treatment Protocol, Patient R. Brennan, confidential. Rosalie had been her first and only test subject for the modified enzyme therapy. Administered under compassionate use protocols with approval from every ethics board Josie could access. The treatment was risky, experimental, built on research Josie conducted during sleepless nights after Rosie's breathing treatments, funded by maxed credit cards and a second mortgage Garrett had never known about, and it was working. Rosie's lung function had improved 23% in 6 months. Her weight was stabilizing. The chronic infections that had hospitalized her repeatedly were becoming less frequent, less severe. Dr. Amanda Chen, Rosie's pulmonologist and the only person besides Josie who knew the full scope of the treatment, called it unprecedented and potentially revolutionary. The federal contract would allow Josie to expand trials to 200 children in 12 hospitals nationwide. It would fund research that could transform cystic fibrosis from a death sentence to a manageable chronic condition. It would make her pharmaceutical company one of the most valuable biotech firms in the country and position her as a leader in pediatric therapeutics. Garrett had left her on the day she became a biotech billionaire, abandoning their daughter just as the treatment that might save her life gained federal backing. The irony would have been funny if it did not hurt so much. The news about Heartwell Therapeutics exploded across business media within hours. Unknown biotech startup wins $30 billion federal contract. Single mother researcher leads breakthrough in pandemic preparedness. Josephine Hartwell, from garage lab to government partnership. Josie's phone did not stop ringing. Investors who had rejected her proposals for years suddenly wanted meetings. Pharmaceutical giants proposed acquisitions. 3 different venture capital firms offered funding packages that would have been unimaginable a week ago. The governor called personally to congratulate her. 2 senators invited her to testify before congressional committees on healthcare innovation. Her small team, 4 researchers who had believed in her vision enough to work for, deferred salaries and equity were suddenly sitting on stock options worth millions. Dr. Reginald Hughes, her lead biochemist, sent a text that just said, "I knew you'd do it. We all did." But Garrett remained silent. No text, no call, no acknowledgement of the woman he had been married to for 9 years. Josie learned through mutual acquaintances that he had moved into Kathleen's penthouse apartment in the Prescott Tower, that Theodore Prescott had announced his new partnership at an exclusive luncheon, that a wedding was being planned with the kind of extravagance that made society pages. Meanwhile, Josie moved Rosie to a better apartment closer to Children's Mercy Hospital, a place with air purification systems and a bedroom flooded with natural light. She hired a nurse to help with overnight breathing treatments. She used her signing bonus to secure experimental medications that insurance would not cover. She assembled a medical team that included the best pediatric pulmonologists in the country. And Rosie, gradually, beautifully, began to thrive. Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic during their next appointment. She reviewed Rosie's latest scans, her expression carefully neutral in the way doctors learned to be when they did not want to give false hope. "Her lung function is improving faster than I've seen in any CF patient. Whatever treatment protocol you've developed, Josephine, it's remarkable. If the clinical trials show similar results across a larger population, they will." Josie said it with quiet certainty. "This is going to work, Amanda. It has to." Dr. Chen looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "I believe you. I've watched you fight for this child with everything you have. If anyone can revolutionize CF treatment, it's you." 4 weeks after Garrett left, a heavy envelope arrived at Josie's new apartment. Cream-colored cardstock, embossed gold lettering, The kind of invitation that screamed old money and social positioning. Catherine Grace Prescott and Garrett Michael Brennan request the honor of your presence at their union. The wedding was scheduled for 6 weeks away at the Prescott estate. Josie stared at the invitation for so long, the words started to blur. Who had sent this? Surely not Garrett. He had not spoken to her since leaving. Kathleen, some cruel society coordinator who did not know or did not care about the circumstances. Delilah found her that evening, the invitation crumpled in her hand, tears streaming down her face despite her best efforts to remain composed. Absolutely not, Delilah said immediately, taking the invitation and preparing to tear it. You are not going to that travesty. He doesn't deserve to see you. He doesn't deserve anything from you. But Rosie, who had been coloring at the kitchen table, looked up with her wide, perceptive eyes. Is Daddy getting married to someone else? Josie's heart broke all over again. Yes, sweetheart. Does he love her more than us? I think Daddy is confused about what love means. Real love shows up. It stays when things are hard. It doesn't leave when people get sick. What Daddy is doing isn't about you or me. It's about him not understanding what he had. Rosie nodded solemnly, then returned to her coloring. A picture of their new apartment with flowers in every window. But the question lingered in the air, and Josie realized she needed closure, not for Garrett's benefit, but for her own, to prove to herself that she could stand in the wreckage of her marriage and walk away stronger. I have to go, she told Delilah quietly. I need to see him marry her. I need to close this chapter completely, to witness what he chose over Rosie and me. Maybe then I can finally move forward without wondering what if. Delilah studied her for a long moment. Then we're going to make sure you look absolutely devastating. He should see exactly what he lost. The morning of the wedding, Delilah arrived with a deep emerald dress that brought out the green in Josie's eyes. Elegant, understated, perfectly tailored. You're going to that party looking like the biotech billionaire you are, Delilah declared, helping with Josie's hair and subtle makeup that highlighted her features without trying too hard. Josie looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The exhausted, desperate wife Garrett had left had been replaced by someone harder, more polished, more certain of her worth. Success looked good on her. Not the arrogant success Garrett craved, but the quiet confidence of someone who had built something meaningful. The Prescott estate was magnificent in a way that felt almost offensive. Sprawling gardens that required a full-time staff. A colonial mansion that had been featured in architectural digests. The kind of generational wealth that Garrett had always envied and never possessed. Crystal chandeliers lit hallways lined with original artwork. Guests in designer clothing circulated through rooms larger than Josie's entire apartment. Their conversations punctuated by laughter that sounded expensive. Josie felt their stares immediately, heard the whispered speculation. Who is that? She's underdressed. Is she a caterer? Wait, isn't that Josephine Hartwell, the pharmaceutical woman? What is she doing here? Did someone actually invite Garrett's ex-wife to his wedding? Delilah's hand tightened around hers. You don't have to do this. We can leave right now. But Josie shook her head. She had come this far. She needed to see it through. The ceremony was held in a garden pavilion strung with thousands of white roses. The kind of display that cost more than Rosie's yearly medications. Josie stood at the very back, partially hidden behind a marble column, watching Garrett wait at an altar draped in silk. He wore a custom tuxedo that fit him perfectly, looked polished and confident, every inch the successful executive he had always wanted to be. When Kathleen appeared in a gown that probably cost $60,000, layers of Belgian lace, and hand-sewn crystals, Garrett's face lit with something Josie had once mistaken for love. But now she recognized it for what it was. Acquisition. He was marrying access, status, the lifestyle he had always believed he deserved. They exchanged vows Josie could not bear to listen to. Promises about faithfulness and partnership from a man who had broken those same promises 2 months earlier. Kathleen looked radiant, genuinely happy, completely unaware that her future husband had abandoned a dying child to stand beside her. At the reception, champagne flowed like water and a string quartet played classical arrangements. Josie accepted a glass from a passing server, her composure perfect even as grief and anger warred in her chest. She had come for closure, to prove she could survive this, that his choice had not destroyed her. She was preparing to leave when a familiar voice stopped her cold. "You shouldn't be here." Garrett's mother, Patricia Brennan, stood before her in a couture suit, her expression icy with judgment and barely concealed contempt. They had never had a good relationship. Patricia had always found Josie too ambitious, too focused on her career, insufficiently devoted to traditional domesticity. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? My son has moved on to better prospects. Don't cause a scene and make this about you. You should have enough self-respect to leave." Before Josie could respond, a man's voice cut through the tension. "Mrs. Brennan, I believe you're mistaken about who should be embarrassed." Theodore Prescott himself stood beside them, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. Josie had seen him from a distance but never spoken to him directly. His intervention was so unexpected she could only stare. "Mr. Prescott," Patricia stammered, "I was just being unnecessarily cruel to a woman who deserves only respect." Theodore interrupted smoothly. He turned to Josie, his expression warm. "Dr. Hartwell, I've been hoping to speak with you. Would you join me for a moment?" Confused but curious, Josie allowed him to guide her away from Patricia, his shocked face, and toward a quieter terrace overlooking the gardens. Delilah started to follow, but Theodore gave a subtle shake of his head. Delilah stayed back, watching carefully. "I owe you an apology," Theodore said once they were alone. "My daughter is marrying a man whose character I severely misjudged, and I'm about to correct that mistake." "I don't understand," Josie said carefully. Theodore's smile was sharp. "3 days ago, I received an interesting call from a colleague at the NIH. She congratulated me on my daughter's connection to you and suggested a potential partnership between Prescott Holdings and Hartwell Therapeutics. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I did some research." He pulled out his phone, showing Josie a series of documents, articles about the federal contract, her patent applications, her company structure, and her stomach dropped, a timeline of her marriage to Garrett, their daughter's illness, the divorce filing. Garrett told us he was single, ambitious, unattached, focused solely on career advancement. He never mentioned a wife of 9 years. He certainly never mentioned abandoning a 6-year-old daughter fighting cystic fibrosis, a daughter whose mother is developing treatments that could revolutionize pediatric medicine. "How did you?" "I have excellent investigators. When my daughter's happiness is involved, I do my due diligence. What I found disgusted me. Garrett used your professional connections to advance his own career then. Discarded you the moment he found what he considered a better opportunity. He signed away his daughter to avoid the inconvenience of her illness. And he lied to my family about everything." Josie felt dizzy. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've built my fortune on integrity, and I won't tolerate deception in my family." His expression softened slightly. "And because my own daughter died of leukemia 20 years ago. She was 7. My late wife and I fought for every moment with her, would have given everything we owned for one more day. The idea that any father would voluntarily abandon a sick child." His voice caught. "It's unconscionable." He straightened, his composure returning. "Garrett's employment is terminated, effective immediately, and I'm about to do something that will seem cruel, but I believe you need to witness it, both for closure and for justice." Before Josie could ask what he meant, Theodore was guiding her back to the reception hall. Kathleen and Garrett were having their first dance. The music swelled, romantic and oblivious, as Theodore walked to the band and requested the microphone. The music stopped. Conversation faded. 500 guests turned their attention to Theodore Prescott, whose expression had transformed into something cold and commanding. "Before we continue this celebration, I need to address something important." Theodore's voice carried across the silent hall. "I built Prescott Holdings on principles of honesty and integrity. I've taught my daughter that character matters more than status, that truth is more valuable than appearance. And I cannot, in good conscience, welcome into our family someone who has fundamentally violated those principles." Kathleen's face drained of color. Garrett looked like he might be sick. The guest leaned forward, sensing scandal. "Garrett Carter presented himself to my family as an ambitious, single professional, but he failed to mention that he was married for 9 years to Dr. Josephine Hartwell, the brilliant pharmaceutical researcher who recently won a $30 billion federal contract, the largest biotech deal in United States history." Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes found Josie, still standing near the terrace entrance, frozen in place as her private life became public spectacle. He failed to mention that he has a 6-year-old daughter named Rosalie, who suffers from cystic fibrosis. A daughter he divorced his wife to abandon, signing away his parental rights just 2 months ago because her medical needs were, in his words, a financial and emotional liability. Kathleen's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes found Josie's across the room. The bride looked shattered, betrayed, as her wedding day unraveled around her. His ex-wife is here tonight, Theodore continued, gesturing toward Josie. That's Dr. Hartwell, standing there with more grace than this situation deserves. The woman who used her professional connections to advance Garrett's career while building her own company, who bore the burden of their daughter's illness largely alone, who was discarded for poverty just as she secured a contract that makes her one of the most valuable pharmaceutical developers in the country. Garrett tried to speak, but Theodore cut him off with a single gesture. Dr. Hartwell is also developing treatments that could save thousands of children like her daughter, treatments that are showing unprecedented results in early trials. While my future son-in-law, the title dripped with sarcasm, was planning his escape from family obligations, his wife was conducting research that could change pediatric medicine forever. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Guests who had been watching Josie with curiosity now looked at her with something like awe. Patricia Brennan looked like she had been struck, and Kathleen was crying, mascara streaming down her face as she stared at Garrett with devastated comprehension. I cannot welcome into my family a man who abandons his responsibilities for convenience, who lies to achieve advantage, who values money over love and status over integrity. The partnership is rescinded. This wedding is canceled. Garrett Brennan, you are no longer welcome in my home or my business. Absolute chaos. Kathleen was sobbing, supported by her mother. Guests were pulling out phones, already sharing the story across social media. Patricia Brennan had disappeared, probably to avoid further embarrassment. And Garrett stood alone at the altar, his carefully constructed new life collapsing in real time, his face a mask of humiliation and desperate anger. But Josie felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a strange hollow vindication. She had not wanted this public spectacle, had not asked for Garrett's destruction. She had simply wanted to move forward with her daughter and her work. Kathleen approached her, still crying, her expensive gown dragging across the marble floor. Up close, she looked younger than Josie had realized, maybe 26, genuinely heartbroken, not the calculating mistress Josie had imagined. I'm so sorry, Kathleen whispered. He told me you were toxic, that you'd tried to trap him with a pregnancy he didn't want, that you'd taken everything from him in the divorce and were bleeding him dry with child support demands. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because he was charming and ambitious and everything seemed perfect. She wiped at her tears, her hands shaking. I didn't know about your daughter, about her illness, that he just left her. What kind of person does that? How could I have been so blind? Josie found herself pitying this woman instead of hating her. Money and charm can hide a lot of flaws. I'm sorry you were deceived. You deserve better than what he offered you. Your daughter, Rosalie, will she be okay? She's responding well to treatment. The prognosis is improving. Can I help? With medical bills or research funding or anything? My trust fund is mine alone, not connected to my father's company. I want to do something meaningful with it, something that matters. Before Josie could respond, Theodore joined them. Kathleen, I think you should go inside. Your mother is worried. Kathleen nodded, but she looked at Josie one more time. I really am sorry. For all of it. After she left, Theodore turned to Josie. I apologize for the public nature of that revelation, but I thought you deserved to see justice done. Too often, men like Garrett face no consequences for their cruelty. Thank you, though I think your daughter is the one who suffered most today. Kathleen is resilient. Better she learns now than after signing contracts she couldn't escape. She'll recover, and she'll be wiser for it. He paused. I meant what I said about a potential partnership. Prescott Holdings has medical properties, research facilities, equipment that could accelerate your clinical trials. If you're interested in discussing collaboration, real collaboration built on professional respect, my office will contact you. I'll consider it, but only if it's based on merit, not charity or guilt. Theodore smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less. That's why I'm proposing it. As she left the Prescott estate with Delilah, Josie looked back once at the mansion, at the wedding that had become a disaster, At the life Garrett had tried to claim, she felt lighter than she had in months, as if watching his public humiliation had finally cut the last threads connecting her to their shared past. That was the most spectacular thing I've ever witnessed. Theodore Prescott is officially my hero, Delilah said as they climbed into the car. Josie laughed. The first real laugh since Garrett had left. It was pretty remarkable. How are you feeling? Free. For the first time since the diagnosis, since the divorce, since everything fell apart, I actually feel free. Now, I need to pause here for a second. If this story is making your blood boil like mine, if you're feeling that justice was served, I need you to smash that subscribe button right now, because what Garrett doesn't know yet is about to make this story legendary. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had someone completely underestimate you? Let me know below, or where you're watching from, or just say I'm with you, Dr. Phillips, because we're not done yet, not even close. The partnership with Prescott Holdings formed slowly, built on professional alignment rather than personal drama. Theodore was true to his word. He provided access to research facilities that accelerated Heartwell Therapeutics' clinical trials, connected Josie with specialists in pediatric medicine, used his considerable influence to fast-track regulatory approvals, and surprisingly, Kathleen became a regular presence in Josie's life. The younger woman visited Rosie weekly, bringing books and games and genuine laughter. She channeled her guilt and heartbreak into advocacy, using her platform to raise awareness and funding for cystic fibrosis research, speaking publicly about how she had almost married a man who abandoned his sick daughter. The media had a field day with the story. The biotech billionaire, the abandoned daughter, the canceled wedding, the justice served by a grieving father who had lost his own child. Josie declined most interview requests, preferring to let her work speak for itself. But she could not avoid all public attention when Heartwell Therapeutics published preliminary clinical trial results showing dramatic improvement in CF patients, when the FDA granted accelerated approval for expanded testing, when major pharmaceutical companies began pursuing acquisition offers that would make her a genuine billionaire. The story became impossible to ignore. Through it all, Garrett tried repeatedly to contact her. His messages evolved from angry, blaming her for his public humiliation, insisting she had somehow orchestrated his downfall, to desperate, then finally to pleading. He showed up at her office building once, but security, now necessary given her company's value, turned him away. 6 months after the canceled wedding, he sent a message requesting to meet at Riverside Park, the place where he had proposed to her 11 years earlier. Josie almost deleted it. Her life had moved forward so completely. Rosie was thriving. The company was expanding. Clinical trials were succeeding beyond her wildest projections. Garrett was part of a painful past she had worked hard to overcome. But something in his message suggested he had finally hit bottom. And despite everything, a small part of her needed complete closure. She found him on their old bench overlooking the river. He looked terrible, his expensive clothes rumpled, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. The confident executive had vanished, leaving behind a broken man who had gambled everything and lost spectacularly. Josie, his voice cracked. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. She sat beside him, maintaining careful distance. I almost didn't. I've been trying to reach you for months. I know. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching boats move slowly down the river. Finally, Garrett spoke. I'm so sorry. For everything. For leaving you. For abandoning Rosie. For being so blind and selfish and cruel. I threw away everything that mattered for things that meant nothing, and I've lost it all. Can you ever forgive me? Josie had imagined this conversation countless times, had rehearsed cutting responses and justified anger. But sitting here now, seeing him genuinely broken, she felt only exhaustion. I forgive you, Garrett. Not for you, but for me. Because carrying that anger only hurts myself. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You made choices that showed me exactly who you are when things get hard. I believe that now. I've lost everything. My job, my reputation. Kathleen, the Prescotts have blacklisted me throughout the industry. No major company will touch me. And Rosie, his voice broke. I abandoned my daughter when she needed me most. What kind of father does that? The kind who valued ambition over love. The kind who saw his family as obstacles instead of blessings. You didn't lose everything, Garrett. You traded it. You traded us for what you thought was a better deal, and you learned too late that some things can't be bought or rebuilt. Can I see her? Can I see Rosie? I know I don't deserve it, but you signed away your rights. You chose to stop being her father. She's doing better now. Actually, thriving. The treatment is working. Her lung function is improving. She's gaining weight, living a life I once thought impossible. I won't disrupt her healing with your guilt. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Maybe someday when she's older, if she wants to know you, that will be her choice. But not now. Not like this. She doesn't need a father who returns because he has nowhere else to go. She deserves better. Josie stood, feeling lighter than she had felt in years, leaving him on the bench where he had once promised to love her forever. The promises had been broken, but she had kept her own. To Rosie, to herself, to the work that defined her. I hope you rebuild your life. I hope you learn what real worth means. Not money or status, but integrity and showing up for people who need you and doing work that matters. But you'll have to learn that on your own. Goodbye, Garrett. She walked away, lighter with each step, leaving him in the past where he belonged. She had turned pain into breakthrough science, betrayal into a biotech empire, and learned that the love she had lost had simply made room for something better. Self-respect, purpose, and a future built on her own terms. 18 months later, Josephine Hartwell stood at a podium before the National Academy of Medicine, her hands resting on either side of a crystal award that caught the light from a dozen different angles. The Lasker Award for Clinical Medical Research, one of the most prestigious honors in biomedical science, sometimes called the American Nobel. The auditorium was filled with the kind of people who had once dismissed her, investors who had rejected her grant proposals with barely concealed condescension, pharmaceutical executives who had called her research too risky, too ambitious, too expensive, academic colleagues who had questioned whether a woman working from a garage laboratory could possibly understand the complexities of enzyme therapy. They were all here now, watching her accept an award for work they had called impossible. But Josie's eyes were not on them. They were on the front row, where Rosalie sat in a navy blue dress with white flowers embroidered on the collar. Her daughter's cheeks were pink with health. Her hair, which had been thin and brittle during the worst of her illness, now fell in thick waves past her shoulders. She was smiling, her small hands clasped together, her eyes shining, with pride that made Josie's heart ache in the best possible way. Beside Rosie sat Delilah, who was crying openly and making no attempt to hide it. Dr. Amanda Chen, who had believed in Josie's treatment protocol when every other pulmonologist called it experimental fantasy. Theodore Prescott, whose expression held the particular satisfaction of someone who had made the right bet at exactly the right time. And Kathleen, the woman who should have been her enemy, had instead become something unexpected. An ally, a friend, someone who showed up for Rosie's birthday parties and research fundraisers with equal enthusiasm. The applause finally died down. Josie took a breath and began to speak. When I started this work 12 years ago, I was a graduate student with more ambition than funding and a hypothesis that most people called naive. I believed that cystic fibrosis did not have to be a death sentence, that children born with this disease deserved more than palliative care and hope, that science could offer something better. She paused, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly against the podium. 3 years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with CF, and everything changed. This was no longer about grants or publications or professional recognition. It was about whether my child would live to see her 10th birthday, whether she would spend her childhood in hospitals or playgrounds, whether I could turn years of theoretical research into something that actually worked. The audience was completely silent. Even the people who had doubted her were leaning forward now, captured by the rawness in her voice. I conducted research in a garage laboratory while working 2 jobs. I maxed out credit cards to fund compound testing. I stayed up until 3 in the morning running trials, then woke up at 6 to administer breathing treatments. I applied for grants that got rejected 37 times. I heard no from investors, from pharmaceutical companies, from people who told me I should accept reality and stop chasing miracles. Josie's eyes found Rosalie again. Her daughter was watching her with such fierce pride that Josie had to pause to collect herself. But I didn't stop, because my daughter deserved a mother who fought for her, and because there are thousands of other children fighting for every breath, whose families are drowning in medical bills and fear and the exhaustion of loving someone whose body is trying to destroy itself She held up the award, the crystal heavy in her hands. "This honor is not just mine. It belongs to Dr. Amanda Chen, who trusted my research when no one else would. To Dr. Reginald Hughes and the team at Heartwell Therapeutics who worked for deferred salaries because they believed in the mission. To Theodore Prescott, who provided resources that accelerated our clinical trials by years. To every family who enrolled their child in our studies, who took a chance on experimental treatment because they were desperate for hope." Her voice grew stronger. "But most of all, this belongs to Rosalie, my daughter, who has been my inspiration, my motivation, and my first patient, who showed unprecedented improvement on the enzyme therapy that is now FDA approved for nationwide use, whose lung function has gone from 58% to 89%, who is living proof that cystic fibrosis can be managed, that children with CF can thrive, that science and love can work together to create miracles." The audience erupted in applause. People were standing now, a full ovation that went on for nearly a minute. Josie saw researchers she respected wiping their eyes, saw journalists typing frantically on their phones, saw the story of her triumph spreading in real time across social media and news outlets. But she also saw, in the back corner of the auditorium, a figure that made her breath catch. Garrett. He had somehow gotten past security, was standing near the exit in a suit that looked expensive, but worn, his face a mask of regret and something that looked like genuine pride. Their eyes met for just a moment. Then Josie looked away. He was her past. This moment, this triumph, was her future. After the ceremony, after the photographs and congratulations and interview requests, after the reception where colleagues who had once dismissed her now wanted to discuss collaboration, Kathleen approached with Theodore. "There's someone here who wanted to congratulate you," Kathleen said carefully. "You can absolutely say no." Patricia Brennan stood a few feet away. Garrett's mother looked older than Josie remembered. Her hair had gone completely silver. The sharp, judgmental edge that had always defined her expression had softened into something that looked like uncertainty. She approached slowly, her hands clasped together in a gesture that almost looked like prayer. "Josephine," Patricia's voice was quiet, stripped of its usual authority. "I came to apologize for how I treated you, for the things I said, for not understanding what you were building or how my son treated you." She took a shaky breath. "I've spent 18 months watching you succeed where he failed, seeing how you've cared for Rosalie when he abandoned her, reading about your research, your company, the children you're saving. I was wrong about everything, and I wondered if—" She glanced at Rosie, who was showing Delilah something on her phone, laughing, in the unself-conscious way of children who felt safe and loved. "If I could possibly be part of my granddaughter's life. I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway." Josie looked at this woman who had criticized her for years, who had sided with Garrett without question, who had called her embarrassing at the wedding that never happened. She could hold that grudge, would be justified in it. But then Rosie noticed them talking and walked over, curious. "Mama, who's that lady?" This is your father's mother, your grandmother Patricia." Rosie studied Patricia with the serious expression she used when processing new information. Then her face softened with the kind of compassion that never failed to amaze Josie. She looked sad. "Can she have some of my cookies? You said sharing makes people feel better." Josie's heart swelled. Her daughter, who had every reason to be bitter, was offering kindness instead. If Rosie could be generous, so could she. Perhaps we could start with occasional visits, under supervision, on Rosie's terms. If she's comfortable, we can build from there. But it's about her, not Garrett. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear," Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. Thank you so much." As Patricia knelt awkwardly to introduce herself to Rosie, offering a tentative smile, that Rosie returned with automatic warmth. Delilah appeared at Josie's elbow. "You're too good. After everything, you're giving her a chance. Rosie deserves to know her grandmother if Patricia is willing to do the work. And people can change. Garrett couldn't, but maybe she can." That evening, after the awards dinner and networking and endless congratulations, after dropping Rosie off with Delilah for a sleepover celebration, Josie finally came home to the quiet of her apartment. It was their fourth home in 2 years, each one larger and brighter than the last. This one had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a kitchen with marble countertops, and a bedroom for Rosie that was 3 times the size of their old living room. But what Josie loved most was how quiet it was. No constant hum of nebulizers, No beeping monitors. No medical equipment transforming living spaces into hospital rooms. Just peace. Just the sound of a home instead of a clinic. She poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the window, watching the city lights spread out below her like stars. Her phone buzzed with messages, the final communications of a very long day. From Theodore, the board approved the expansion. 3 new research facilities. You're going to change the world, Dr. Hartwell. From Kathleen, Rosie told me tonight that I'm her fancy friend who buys good books. I've never been more honored by any title. From Dr. Chen, congratulations on an award you earned 1,000 times over. The CF community is lucky to have you. And from a number she didn't recognize, I saw your award on the news. You deserved it. I'm sorry I couldn't see what you were building when it mattered. I hope Rosie is well. Gee. Josie stared at Garrett's message for a long moment. She could respond, could tell him about Rosie's improvement, about the clinical trials, about everything he had missed. Part of her even wanted him to know exactly what his daughter's life looked like now. How she laughed easily, how she ran without getting winded, how she was planning to try out for soccer in the fall, something that would have been impossible 2 years ago. But that information was not his to have. He had signed away his rights to their daughter's milestones, had chosen to stop being her father when being her father became inconvenient. So Josie deleted the message without responding. Let him wonder. Let him live with the consequences of choices he could not undo. She opened her email instead and pulled up the folder labeled Next Phase. Inside were proposals for expanding Hartwell Therapeutics into treatments for other genetic disorders, preliminary research on muscular dystrophy, early trials for a new approach to sickle cell disease, collaboration requests from research hospitals in 7 countries. There was so much work to do, so many children who needed what she had built for Rosie, so many families desperate for hope. Tomorrow, she would start again, would dive back into research and clinical trials and the endless process of turning scientific theory into medical reality, would fight for funding and regulatory approval and the 1,000 small battles that led to breakthrough treatments. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply exist in this moment of triumph, to feel the weight of the Lasker Award on her desk, to know that her daughter was sleeping peacefully at Delilah's apartment, her lungs functioning at 89% capacity, her future stretching out bright and possible, to understand that she had turned the worst betrayal of her life into something that mattered, had transformed pain into purpose, had proven that her worth was never determined by who loved her or who left her, but by what she chose to build in the aftermath. She had been discarded as worthless, and she had become invaluable, not for Garrett's benefit, not for revenge or vindication or the satisfaction of proving him wrong, but for herself, for Rosie, for the thousands of children who would live because she had refused to give up when everything fell apart. Listen, we're almost at the end of this incredible journey, but before I finish, I need you to understand something important. This story is not just about karma, though karma was absolutely served. It's not just about a man who made terrible choices and faced consequences, though that happened too. This story is about what you do when the person who is supposed to love you decides you're not worth staying for. What you do when your life falls apart and you have every reason to quit. What you do when you're exhausted and broke and terrified, but there's a child depending on you to keep fighting. Josephine Hartwell could have given up. She could have accepted Garrett's narrative that their life was hopeless, that Rosie's illness was unsurvivable, that she was failing. She could have let his abandonment define her, could have spent years bitter and broken, focused on what she lost instead of what she could build. But she didn't. She took the worst day of her life and turned it into fuel, used her pain to drive research that saved her daughter and thousands of others, built an empire from a garage laboratory and a mother's desperate love, proved that your worth is not determined by who leaves you, but by what you choose to create from the rubble. Here's what I need you to take from this. Your value is not determined by who underestimates you. Josephine was brilliant when Garrett called her work a failure. She was building something extraordinary when he called their life poverty. She was on the verge of a $30 billion contract when he said she had no potential. His perception of her worth had nothing to do with her actual value. Integrity always wins long term. Garrett got his partnership, his wealthy fiancée, his mansion lifestyle, for exactly 2 months. Then it all collapsed because it was built on deception. Meanwhile, Josie built slowly, honestly, with integrity, and her success lasted because it was real. Betrayal can be the catalyst for your greatest success. If Garrett hadn't left, Josie might have kept sacrificing her own ambitions to support his. She might have stayed small to make him feel big. His abandonment forced her to step fully into her own power, to build something entirely hers, to stop waiting for someone else's permission to be extraordinary. Real love shows up, especially when things are hard. Garrett left when Rosie got sick. Josie stayed and fought. Delilah showed up with breakfast and a plan. Dr. Chen believed in experimental treatment. Theodore provided resources. Kathleen turned guilt into advocacy. Real love is not romantic words at an altar. It's showing up at 3 a.m. breathing crises. It's believing in someone when they can barely believe in themselves. And finally, karma is patient but precise. Garrett's reckoning did not come immediately. He had 2 months of thinking he had won. 2 months of living in a penthouse and planning a wedding and believing he had traded up. And then everything collapsed in the most public, devastating way possible. Not because Josie orchestrated it, but because deception eventually exposes itself. Because men like Theodore Prescott do their due diligence. Because the universe has a way of correcting injustice, sometimes slowly, but always thoroughly. So here's what I need you to do right now. If this story impacted you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than whoever left you, if it showed you that your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it, hit that subscribe button right now and ring that bell. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Or tell me about a time someone underestimated you and you proved them wrong. Or just say, I'm with you, Dr. Phillips. Let me know this story meant something to you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's going through a betrayal. Someone who's fighting for a sick child. Someone who's been told their dreams are too big or their work doesn't matter. Someone who needs to be reminded that the best revenge is a life well lived and that integrity always, always wins. Because here's the truth. There are people right now standing where Josephine stood that morning, holding their phone with life-changing news in one hand while watching their marriage end in the other, caring for a sick child while someone calls it hopeless, building something extraordinary while someone calls it a failure. And they need to know how this story ends. They need to know that 18 months from now, they could be standing at a podium accepting an award for work that changed the world, that their daughter could be sitting in the front row with pink cheeks and 89% lung function, that the person who left could be standing in the back, finally understanding what they lost while they stand in the light of everything they built. That's the story I want you to take with you. Not just that karma is real, though it is, but that you have the power to transform your pain into purpose, to turn betrayal into breakthrough, to build something so magnificent that the person who discarded you becomes nothing more than a footnote in your story of triumph. Josephine Hartwell did that, and so can you. I'm Dr. Phillips. Thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging with stories that matter. And remember, your worth is not determined by who stays or who leaves. It's determined by what you choose to build when everything falls apart. Until next time, keep fighting for what matters. Keep showing up for the people who need you. Keep building with integrity and trust that the universe is paying attention. I'll see you in the next story.